finding value, how to determine maximum offer. So the first thing we have to do when we determine value is look at the comparable sales and the comparable actives. So what I mean by that is, let's just say, for instance, you can buy 1,000 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath. You want to know how much it's worth. Well, you have to have something to compare it to. I mean, if it's the only house that's ever been built that size in the neighborhood, there's nothing around you, boy, I'd probably be staying away. But let's assume there's several that you can compare it to. What characteristics do we want to compare our property to another property? What does the other property have to have? So in my example, it's 1,000 square feet, 2-bedroom, 1-bath. I want that property to be a quarter mile away or closer. Now, in some areas, we have a high crime rate on one side of the freeway, a nice neighborhood on the other side of the freeway, and they're within a quarter mile. Well, we have to take that in consideration as well. But if we're doing this virtually, we won't know some of those things. So bird's eye view, a quarter mile away. We want it to be 6 months, that comparable. Whatever it is, if it's sold, I want it to be sold within the last 6 months, not a year, a little too far to stretch. I want the subject property and what I'm comparing it to be within 200 square feet up and down. So I have 1,000 square feet, 2-bedroom, 1-bath. My comparables can only be between 800 square feet and 1,200 square feet. So they can't be 1,800, 1,500, 700 square feet. It has to be within 200 square feet up and down. And it has to be like type. So if I have a 2-bedroom, 1-bath block house and I have a 2-bedroom, 1-bath stick framed house, well, those aren't like type. Or if I have a colonial house and the other one isn't, it's not like type. So I want to try to get like type. And you can Google, if you're doing this virtually, Google, look at the pictures of the front of the house. Yeah, my house looks like that house. I also want the houses to be within 5 years of age of one another. So if my little 1,000 square foot house, 2-bedroom, 1-bath, was built in 1960, only houses that were built between 1955 and 1965 will I use as comparables, because a brand new, a house built in 1980, it can't compare to a house that was built in 1960. And so try to do 5 years of age up and down. And then you've got to stay same bedrooms, bathrooms. Sometimes you can't. That's a little harder. But if you can, try real hard. What I mean by that is, let's assume I have this 1,000 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath. My comparable is within a quarter mile. It was sold within the last 6 months. Same year built, like type construction, but it's a 3-in-1. Well, I can't use it exactly as a comparable. I have to determine, and it's not hard to do, but you'll have to determine what that extra bedroom costs. But I want to compare it to a 2-in-1 if I have multiple 2-in-1s I can compare it to. So let's recap this. 6 months of sale or sooner, no more than a quarter mile, 200 square feet up or down. So if the subject property is 1,000, 800 to 1,200. 5 years of age, construction date. So if mine was built in 1960, I'm going to go 1955, 1965. Like type, so A-frames, flats, whatever it is, blocks, stick frame, whatever it is. Same bedrooms and bathrooms, so 2-in-1 and a 2-in-1. I don't want to go to a 4-in-2. Won't help me. So now I have comparables. So black and white, pieces of paper, ink on it. I have something that says, okay, I have these houses, like type. Here's some on the market, and here's some that have sold within the last 6 months. Now that on the market's important too, okay? So don't just look at your solds, although that's a pretty good indicator, but what's on the market's important too. One of the nice numbers I'd like to know as I'm looking at a market is what's my days on market. So how many days does a house typically sit on the market within that little area, that little pocket that I'm looking at? And you'll need a realtor for that because they'll have access to the MLS, multiple listing service. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my comparables. I want 3 actives and I want 3 solds. And I'm going to go for a drive if I can. If I'm virtual, then I can't do that. I'm going to do a lot more research over the phone, Google, those kinds of things. But if I can go for a drive, I'm going to do what I call a 6-pack. So I'm going to cut these in 2. I have my subject property. I'm going to go knock on doors of 3 homeowners that have just bought a house in the neighborhood that's a comparable to my house that I want to buy. And I'm going to ask them important questions like, what were the concessions from the seller? Did you guys have a realtor? Did they help you with lending costs? What upgrades did they provide for you? Was the house in as is, or did they change it for you to move in like carpet or paint and what have you? What about the house caused you to want to buy it? Do you know anything about the property now after you've bought it that was a positive or a negative that would have influenced your decision? I want to know what these people paid, if they'd still buy it again, what was included, because here's the deal. There's a difference between as is and ARV, and I always want to go to as is value. I want to know what the as is value of a property is. So if my 3 just solds all had brand new carpet, brand new paint, they had brand new appliances, they were rehabbed, that's ARV. That's absolutely ARV. And I need to know that because my property probably doesn't have that kind of stuff yet. Then the seller that sold it to the buyer, if they put dual pane windows in it, one of them they did that. Maybe on one they put granite, the other one they left Formica, and the other one has Corian. Well, I need to know those things, and the only way to know those things is ask the seller that bought the house. So I'm going to interview. Then I'm going to go and look at the 3 houses that are on the market for sale that are comparables to mine. What else is being offered to my buyer pool that I'm going to have to compete with? And what price points and what concessions? Because let's face it, a realtor's house, so it has a realtor listing. They've got it on the market. I know they're paying 6 to 7% on realtor fees, which I'm going to pay all day long. I know that they can offer 4% buyer concessions for the lender if they have paint and carpet and all the other good stuff that goes along with it, or if they're giving some construction concessions. I need to know that because I need to subtract that from my value when I place my value, because I'm not going to have a realtor. I'm not going to offer the 4%, or the seller's not offering me 4%, but I'm going to reduce that. So I need to take all that consideration. And I need to see what's included in the house and how it's going to compare to the house that I'm going to buy and resell. Important things. It's absolutely important. All of this is to determine if my house is as is an ARV. Now, here's the question. It's a big question, not like a huge question, like where'd we come from? God, in case anybody didn't know. There's a question about, can an ARV be as is? Yes. If all the houses look like the house you're buying, it's ARV, after repair, because it doesn't need anything. It fits. It's what people buy. It's what's on the market. But if all the houses have, or 2/3 of the houses, or 3/4 of the houses, or half the houses are fixed up, they're going to be offered at a different price point than the ones that aren't fixed up. And feel free to use REOs. That's a bank-owned property, real estate owned by a bank. Look at the REO, because the REO, they're just going to be boarded up. They're nothing fancy. Nothing, an investor hasn't gone in there and rehabbed them. And look at those price point differences. But let's assume for a second you can come up with ARV. You've done all your research. All the properties on the market are saying, hey, this house, ARV is 100. Well, how do you find out what the as is? Well, it's pretty simple. If you think about it, I have an inbound phone call conversation with my seller. So now I know, I've done my little research. Now I know my seller, I know my house is worth, let's call it $100,000. My house is worth $100,000. That's ARV. That's what the seller said. Well, if I've done enough research and I have enough background in construction, I can figure the costs to take it back. But I'm going to talk about costs here in a second, to take it back to as is. But let's assume I don't have a lot of construction knowledge. And remember, the beginning process, you have to rely upon the seller a lot to tell you the truth. I don't think people inherently want to lie to us. So we're having a conversation. One of the questions I'm going to ask them is, what are they, knowing that I pay all the costs, that I buy houses like yours in as-is condition every day, and I can give you your money on the day of your choice. What do you think I'm going to have to pay for the repairs or to bring it up to market conditions? The sellers could say all kinds of things, but here's the obvious ones. Nothing. It's perfect. It's perfect. Nothing needs to be done to it. And if a seller says nothing needs to be done to it, there's a rebuttal to that. And let me give you a little hint on that rebuttal. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it's interesting. Nothing needs to be done. So is the house in the exact same condition it was when you bought it? Or was it modernized when you bought it? Or tell me the difference. Oh, no, it looks the same. Oh, it looks the same. Oh, so when you bought it, how long have you had it now? And I know these things, by the way. I've done my due diligence. Maybe I don't. Well, I've been here for 5 years. You've been there for 5 years. Wow. So you replaced the carpet so it has same age carpet as when? No, I didn't do that. Oh, have you recently painted it? No, I didn't do that. Oh, so it's not like it was when you bought the house. What do you think it will cost me to bring it to the condition it was when you bought it? It's in good condition. It doesn't need anything. It doesn't need anything. Interesting. And we're going to fight through this conversation of getting them to give us a number, but maybe they don't give us a number. Zero, the word zero, when a seller says it doesn't need anything, always means $5,000. Zero always means $5,000. It doesn't mean zero. It doesn't mean 1,000. It doesn't mean 500. It doesn't mean maybe nothing. It means $5,000. If the seller says it needs $10,000, that's $10,000. If it says it needs $20,000, that's $20,000. So here I have this $100,000 house. And the seller says to me, it needs $5,000 worth of work. Pretty simple. That's an easy one. I know if it needs $5,000 and the seller thinks it's worth 100, and I think it's worth 100, but I can't figure out the exact construction cost yet. I'm going to take 5,000 times 2, cost of construction, the actual cost of doing it, and then I'm going to multiply it by 2 because I have to be paid for doing it. My time's important. My energy is important. The seller may be wrong. All these numbers are important. So the seller says $5,000. They think it's worth 100, and that's ARV. And I'm going to take 5,000 times 2, subtract that from the 100. My as is 90. And I'm going to do my calculations based upon 90. So I'm going to offer them 65 cents or less based upon $90,000. Oh, I'm not going to offer it, by the way. I'm going to get them to commit to a value that would cause me to say yes, because the value they want to commit to is less than the 65 cents off of 90,000. So let's assume for a second it's needed $10,000 worth of work. Or let's go 9,000. It's easier to talk about 9,000, 10,000 at the moment. So $9,000, it's $100,000 ARV. 9,000 times 2 is 18,000. 18,000 from 100 is 82,000. Did I do that right? 9,000 times 2 is 18,000. 18,000 from 100 is 82,000. Going to go 65 cents on the 82,000. That's my maximum allowable offer. I'm not going to give them an offer. We're going to talk. We're going to use questions like when a seller says to me, and I know I'm jumping all over, but it's just important stuff, guys. When a seller says to me, when I ask them, so how much, before I ask that question, let me tell you a little bit about what I do, and I tell them all the things that we do and how we buy houses. So knowing that that's how I buy houses, what were you hoping to put in your pocket? What we call the walkaway money, the amount of money that you believe is fair to sell me your house today. How much walkaway money did you need? And they give you a number. And let's say for instance, they think their house is worth 100, they want 90. So they go $90,000. Now there's a couple things I could do. I could drop the phone because that's ridiculous value to be trying to place on a property in this condition, $9,000 worth of work. But the sellers think that way. Well, it's worth 100. It's $9,000 worth of work. I'll take 90 and blah, blah, blah. That doesn't work that way. But anyway, I could drop the phone. I can instantly say, well, that's not going to work, blah, 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 and they just hang up on me. Or I could do what I do. And here's what I want you to do. I want you guys to think about this for a second. So here we're going to role play all by myself. I'm going to pretend I'm talking to you too. So think about this. I ask you, what about amount of money you want on your walkaway? And you say 90,000. This is what I say. Somewhere in that waiting, that silence, typically you're going to hear from the seller, you still there? And I love that question because I'm always here. To that, I always say, I am. I was just thinking about that number. Wow, 90,000. Ouch. But that pause, oh man, that pause is great. And then I'm going to come back to them and I'm going, now if the 90,000's my number, maybe they didn't say 90, maybe they said 50. I'm not going to ask for a price reduction. I just won't do it. I won't negotiate someone past or below 50%. I just won't do it. Even though I know I can. Absolutely know I can. I'm not going to do it. I don't think it's ethical. But if you want to beat on your chest and prove how great you are at negotiation and you want to get them down, it's your choice. My choice, not going to do it. But let's assume for a second they said 90, and I've got to get them to at least 85 cents on the dollar or I can't continue the call. Because unless I know I have a seller that's willing to drop it 15% over the phone, I'm not going to go out there and meet them. I'm not going to continue the phone call if it's a virtual call. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to waste my time unless I know I have someone on the other end of the phone that's motivated and understands how we're going to buy a house. Won't do it. So the questions I have to ask them after that is, and I'm going to give them a scenario. Again, we pay all the costs, things like real estate commissions, closing costs, transfer tax, title insurance. We buy them in the as-is condition. I'm not going to ask you to do any of the repairs. And we can have your cash on the day of your choice. Is the $90,000 that you mentioned earlier the least you'll take? So you're going to give them a reason to reduce. And they're going to say, yes, no, I think I can do 85,000. And even though 85,000 is my number now, I'm still trying to get to the 65 cents on the dollar number. And I'm going to keep asking them. Every time I ask them, I'm going to ask them a different way. And every time they do a price reduction, I'm going to ask them 3 times until they stop doing a price reduction. So we may go on this thing for 7, 8 times here. And I can ask 7 or 8 different questions about price reduction. We just need to learn how to do that. But when we get to the number that we can play with, then I can go forward. And sorry, I got sidetracked. But so I have this $100,000 house. It has $9,000 worth of repairs. That's times 2 is 18,000. That's $82,000 in value. That's what I know it's worth right now, based upon what they've told me. So they have to be 85 cents of 82 before I get excited, before I even make the appointment. But let's assume for a second they said it needs $11,000 in repairs. Ouch. And I love those ouch words. Man, ouch. And negative reinforcements is great. Learn negative reinforcements. I'll teach you how to do that. So here we are. We've got this $100,000 house. It needs $11,000. And, like before, if we just took the zero and it means 5,000 and we just doubled it, and we took the 9,000, we just doubled it and subtracted from the ARV, we came up with our as is. This time we don't do it that way because it's more than 10,000. They said it was 11,000. So now, because of my earlier conversations with the seller, and because I asked him, what do I have to do to the house? And I've gone through the scenarios of different parts of the house. And they said, well, the $9,000 just covers carpet and paint and the garage door. That's pretty simple. I can get that stuff done in a month. That's not a hard thing at all. But if they say it's $9,000 that needs to be re-roofed and I need an air conditioner, well, first of all, they're $11,000, maybe a little light. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. But I'm going to still rely upon their honesty. But I know that's probably going to go into 2 months. So what I do is I take the 11,000, anything over 10,000. I take the money over 10. I don't multiply it by 2. But I ask myself this question. How many months do I think, my experience, will it take me to rehab the house? In my first scenario where it was a month, I'm going to multiply months by $10,000. So in the first scenario, I'm going to take 11,000 plus 1 month of 10,000. That's 21,000. I'm going to subtract 21,000 from 100. My as is 79. But if it has harder work that's going to take longer to do, and it's going to go into that 2 months, then I'm going to take the 11,000, 10,000 times 2. So that's 20. That's 31 from 100. Now that as is 69. And the reason I take $10,000 per month is you have holding costs. You've got management costs. You've got what you don't know costs. You've got a lot of obstacles and things that could come up in front of you that you've got to mitigate by paying for. And you want to make sure that you've covered that. And I have found $10,000 per month is enough. If I go out there and hire a general building contractor in a cost plus arrangement, I know that, I've got to pay him 10 grand a month. And then I've got some holding costs and I got to build all this stuff in. 0 repairs, always is 5 times 2, is 10 minus ARV, that gets your as is. Under 10,000, always repairs times 2 minus ARV, that gets you your as is. Over 10,000, it's the repairs times 10,000 per month minus ARV gets you your as is. Pretty simple. Not that hard if you look at it. Now, I know that these numbers are justifiable because I'm going to go through my BPO process and I'm going to go through my appraisal. Now, the appraiser is not going to give me, typically, rarely, the appraiser is not going to give me the repair cost because they're always appraising it as is. Unless I tell them, hey, I'm doing this major rehab and this is all the things I'm going to do, they're going to give me an as-is appraisal. But the BPO, they're going to give me both the as-is and the ARV, and they're going to give me the repair costs. Pretty cool. Now, they're not contractors. They're just realtors. However, I have to rely on somebody's experience, but I'm also going to have a home inspector to go out there between the two of those and give me a pretty good accurate figure on costs. A bird's eye view with pictures and reports of rooms and condition and insulation and windows and roofing and all that stuff. It's cool. I've got about $1,000 in a property that I take under contract before I decide to buy it because I want to make sure I don't buy that lemon property or overvalued property. So now we have our as-is, we have our ARV. We figure our 65 cents on our as-is. Some people are going to say, but Mike, there's some mini deals out there. If I buy a $50,000 house, how do I make any money on that? How do I figure a minimum? That's a very important question. So let's assume for a second it's worth 50 as is ARV. It doesn't need anything. So it qualifies to be both as is and ARV. Now, it really wouldn't because we take the 10,000 off of it. But let's assume for this scenario, it does. If I just took 65 cents off of 50, I'm left with what is that, $32.50? Let me get my calculator out. I used to be able to do this in my brain. $50,000. And by the way, anytime you talk to a seller and you're talking numbers, even if you have like this Rain Man brain, you can multiply numbers. Do not do it that way. Always use your calculator and do what I'm doing right now. And do it right now. It's easy. You'll understand it. Got my calculator. It's always, the little breast pocket calculator. Don't bring out this big old fat machine. So you're going to go 50,000. So I'm saying to them what I'm doing. 50,000. And if I'm multiplying, I'm just going to say times, and I'm giving them all of this stuff. Now, in this case, I'm not going to say 65 cents. But anytime you use a calculator in front of your seller, always tell them what you're doing on the calculator. But in this case, I'm going to go $50,000 times 0.65. That means, I was right, cool. I'm not getting so old. 32,500 would be my maximum allowable offer, but it isn't in this case because this is what we call a mini deal. My mini deal, I do not want to net less than $15,000 at any time. Doesn't even get me excited. I'm not going to do a deal and only make $6,000. Not going to do it. But in this case, if I did it for the 32.5, I wouldn't be making $15,000. So here's how we do that. You take $15,000 as your base, or whatever your mini deal net number is for you. Mine is 15. You take 10% of what it's going to sell for. So in this case, 50,000. 10% times 50,000 is 5,000. Now I know to buy it and sell it, you're going to figure about 8.25%. I like using 10%, easy numbers to multiply. So what? It's another 1.75%. Don't shave so close that you get it so tight that you can't make any money. So use 15,000 as your net profit, 10% of your resale value. In this case, it's as is and resales the same number. So 10% of the 50 is 5,000. Then always figure replenishing your marketing dollar. Always figure replenishing your marketing dollar. And I like using 10% of what I want to make or what I expect to make. So in this case, my mini deal is $15,000. So 10% of 15,000 is 1,500. So I'm going to add 15,000, 5,000, 1,500 together, and that's going to be 21,500. I'm going to take that 21,500 from the $50,000 original as is ARV. My maximum allowable offer to the seller is now 28,500. I can't offer them 32,500. Now get this one. Remember earlier, I said every time a seller says it doesn't need anything, you use a basis of $5,000. You multiply that by 2, that's 10,000. So in this scenario, if I take $50,000 to get to my as is, I'm going to take 10 off of that. So my as is actually 40. If I take 21,500 off of 40, my maximum allowable offer is 18,500. Where if I just took 65 cents off of 40, it's 26,000. So you got to have mini deal calculations. Really, 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 really important.